somehow the only one that starts eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich and ends up looking like the Joker. Okay, so that's it. We'll try that. I really don't like that angle, but we're gonna go with it because I don't want to miss any more time. So, hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Joanna G. Holden. Who are you?
Trudy Holden.
Trudy Holden. This is Trudy. She wanted to join me for my video today, and that's the other wannabe star for today. So,
And she's
yay!
Kaylin.
She is. All right. So today I thought I'd do something a little bit differently. As you can see, I've got pretty much the whole family here except for my husband. But you know what? This is writer life. You do things that are writer related and you end up with a whole posse doing it with you. So I'm just going to go with it today. And I'm just going to, let it happen as it happens. And yeah, you get bored, you'll just leave, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of booktubers and even sometimes author tubers do bookshelf tours where they show all the books that they own and they talk a little bit about their favorite ones.
They own, yeah.
And
and I like my books.
She does. She has a whole shelf, a whole case full of her own books, her own little picture books. So I wanted to do something similar where I just share with you what's going on my writer notebook shelf and do a notebook book tour.
And I got to show you something cool.
Woo, focus. There we go. So up here at the top, we have some beautiful artwork that my amazing niece, Havila Puccio, did. And it's just, I love it so much. I can't wait till I have an office to put that in. Yes, the next shelf has your alphabet cards and your number cards. Just don't dump them, okay? This shelf is Mommy's shelf. I've got all my planners, I've got all my homeschool mommy books and some writer books, and then these are self-published books and printed books. Yes, that is your notebook. So these are all of the notebooks. I was homeschooled K through 12, and I plan on homeschooling my kids K through 12. And my mother graciously sent me, although I probably could not have stopped her if I'd wanted to. She sent me all these amazing notebooks to get started with. And yes, that's the pink one. So I'm going to skip actually down to the bottom shelf. You can see I've got some of my YA fiction down there and some extra Bibles and some more writing materials, as well as I have all of the books, and you can kind of see them here. I have all the books that I wrote as a kid in school that we did like our own hand binding as school projects. So I actually have all of those, which is awesome. It kind of reminds me of where I started. And then here I have, as you can see, my writing shelf. Now I do have several other boxes, as case in point, I've got one right here that baby was getting into a minute ago, full of stuff, but for the most part, this is where I keep all of my stuff. And I'm going to just kind of take you through some of these notebooks of the big stories and just show you what I've got going on. Okay, the girls are playing. So let's see if we can do this. So, okay. So you see, as I showed you, this is my shelf, and basically I have not thrown away papers from an idea for a story unless absolutely necessary for as long as I've been writing. So as you can see, I have a nice plethora of material to work from when I'm ready to start a new story. And I also have, let me grab it, I did get it. But I also have my master notebook. This is my official writer's journal. And in this, I keep a running list of all of the titles that I want to publish, from middle grade novels to novellas to full novels and series, categorized by genre and subgenre in some cases. Sometimes people who aren't writers, and even sometimes writers, don't understand why it's a difficult decision trying, just thinking about how many years you have ahead of you. Why would you bother writing a book now, when you're a young mother and you have so little time to yourself? Why would you write a novel right now? Well, apart from the fact that it's just so in my DNA that I can't not write, or I start, feeling weird, I have a lot of books to write, and I only have so much time to write them. Plus the fact that I don't know, no day is guaranteed. Sad as it is, I could be dead tomorrow. I don't want to leave this world not having written anything. I want to leave something behind to better the world. So I'm going to count up the books just real quickly in each genre. Let's see how many books it is that I actually have to write. So a current running tally of 14 fantasy novels, not including the 4 to follow this book I am now working on, the 4 remaining in the series. So that puts it at 18. So 18 fantasy stories. That would be middle grade novella and novels. 18. So here are 5 to 6 fantasy sci-fi crossovers with a potential 7. 10 historical fiction novels with a potential for an American history series spanning the years between 1737 and 1945. And I don't have the entire running list of novels, but I'm pretty sure that was somewhere between 20 and 30. And those would be shorter novels, like, 75,000 words average, but still, that'd be 20 to 30 of them. So, let me just tally that back up for you here. So that's 21 middle grade novels, novellas, novels, plus a potential for 20 to 30 more. That's 21. That's a lot of books, okay? That is a ton of books. And given that I have only written, I'm not even finished writing this novel that I started 2 years ago, right? That's 2 years for a bulky novel. Now, of course, I'll be getting faster. I'm going to push to write these books faster. But that's why I am pushing to be a writer now instead of waiting until it's more convenient. First of all, when is life convenient for anybody? Seriously, who has an easy life where writing is just something that they can do in their leisure time and still become a professional author? Just doesn't happen. Okay, so the first thing I have on the shelf, and I'm actually taking everything off of the shelf just because I want to see it. The first thing on this shelf is a behemoth of a notebook. Look how giant this thing is. It's like 5 or 6 inches thick. This is our, so if you can see it, it's backwards, but Heirs of Arkma, which was originally the Letters of Askpen or the Daughters of Askpen. And it was a series that my five friends and I put together over the course of 2 years when we were teenagers. It was about 6 different princesses. They were all sisters, and they all ran from the kingdom at the same time when their lives were threatened by the evil bad guy. So they each fled to a different part of the world that we created, and then each girl's story centered around what part of the world she went to, the characters they met there, the bad guys that they faced there, and then we all had a similar timeline and some basic, threads that ran through all our stories. But when we first did it, we wrote them as letters to each other. I think it was 12 total, and we did it over the course of 2 years. My mother called it the project that ate the house. She wondered when it would ever end. I feel so bad for my mother. I put her through so much. But so I have all of the original letters that I sent and that I received. And I'm going to see if I don't think I can turn this around. So it's going to be backwards for a minute, but we started off, I don't know if you can see this, that's what we started off with. We didn't do outlines back then. We had a basic story starter, that's what we called it. And it was 2 pages of just very bare minimum stuff. And then you can see I have each character has their name and a tab. And then I just kept all the letters together. So we had thought about potentially, wow, this is really close. I don't like that it's that close. We had thought about combining them as actual novels and then in a narrative instead of as letters and then publishing them. But, which I actually have that, we started doing that. That's the next book on the shelf is Adelie was the name of my character, Adelie. And Heirs of Arkma, and her story was called Star Song, I think was what it ended up being called. But we ended up not being able to do it because, 6 people, that's a lot of people, and we each had different life issues going on. And, only some of us were actually able to devote large chunks of time to writing at that point in time. So we just decided everybody just take your characters and the unique plot development and stuff and world building that you came up with, and then just the stuff that belonged to other people just don't use, but then you can use whatever you want to make more stories. And actually, I'm going to be taking a lot of stuff from my novel and using it in a book that will be coming up very soon that I'm working on with a friend. So keep your eyes out for that video. Okay, I'm at 3 minutes, so we're good. The next notebook on the shelf is and it says Joanna R. Glass on it. So you can tell this is novel and short story ideas and pieces. And this is basically just, I told you, I don't throw stuff away. I put it in a notebook. And this is my notebook for random stuff that I don't know where it goes. But I have some of my sister's story work in here. I have some random story pieces and illustrations. I used to do a lot of illustrations for my stories. And then I just have a lot of random, like, one-page descriptions for these random, like this. Far Away West was a story idea that I worked on. And let's see. Yeah. A lot of these were stories that I came up with as a teenager. I'm pretty sure all of these I came up with as a teenager or young adult. We're back. Let's try this again. Sorry, I was having trouble with stuff falling off of my shelf because I was pulling everything off. So the next thing that I'm going to pull up is, of course, my Coastlander series notebook, which is not nearly as hefty as the other notebook. I may actually have to switch them eventually. And again, like, I did a video on this, and I'll try to pop it up in the cards, whichever side that's on. I'm going to do a whole other video on how to make one yourself, like what kinds of things to include, and different fun things that you can make, and how to make them to include some really cool stuff that will help you in your writing journey if you're making a giant series. Especially something like science fiction or fantasy where world building is important, but even like historical fiction where there's a ton of research that goes into it. So then I have 2 other Coastlander notebooks. I have just a nice little bland 3-subject binder that was my original just basic series notebook. Like, I have steps to world building on here, and I have all my handwritten. I can read it. I don't know if anybody else could, but I can read it. And that just, again, that's probably all going to get torn out, retyped, and put in my giant series notebook when I'm done. And this, I've showed how terrible, like, this is falling to pieces. But this is my notebook for what I'm working on right now with this book, Coastlander the Enigma. I'm probably still going to change that name, but I don't know to what, so that's what's named for now. That's its working title. And then I have my author platform notebook, which is also just a plain, this one's 5 subjects, so it's a little bit more exciting. But it has things like inspirational quotes, it has my general information and ideas, it has information on my accounts, including AuthorTube. It has my self-publishing checklist, which I actually am thinking about including as like a benefit to signing up for my newsletter. You'd get that. Just put in the comments below if you'd like to be able to receive that as part of like being on my newsletter and my mailing list, and I'll add that in there if you guys are really interested. And while we're on the subject of the Coastlander series, I think y'all will all get a kick out of this. I've mentioned before, the book and the following books in the series came from a fantasy trilogy that I wrote when I was 10 years old, 10, 11, and 13. And I actually have those. Do you want to see them? Like, I wasn't going to show them until another video, but like I was going to show you. Okay, this is the first one I wrote when I was 10. Ah! And then this is the second one I wrote when I was 11. And we bound these like in school. So like, and I have the back of the blurb for the next book. And then this one never got a cover. Like, I don't know why. We moved and things got weird. But so those are the originals. And then because I still love that original storyline, even though really I haven't kept anything from it, I have a notebook, TCOR, the Count of Rondeau. I'll explain where that name came from later, but I have all of the original like stuff, like handwritten pages, and then like printed pages, and like, look at all that. I have always been obsessed with like editing with bright colored things. I see it better, so it makes it easier for me. So I have that, and then I have some more random fantasy stuff. This is actually an interesting project that I am considering bringing back from the dead. Director's copy, there was actually a phase, I think it was like 15, 16, and 17, Independent films were becoming a big deal in the homeschooling community. Like, everybody and their brother was making one. So I decided I was going to make one, and I wrote up an entire screenplay for one, and we filmed, like, I want to say like a good third of the scenes from the script, and then we ended up never getting back to it. And like, we spent close to $100 on materials, made our own costumes and our own swords, and we had a great cast, but we just never finished. Like, here you can see scene 1, and then like scene 2. Whoops, no. One of my many goals is to eventually take works that I may not publish, and then just print them for myself, and this would be one of those. I'm pretty sure that I have this backed up to a hard drive somewhere, and just put it in a POD format, slap a, stock photo cover on it, and just print off a copy for myself. So it's not just sitting here in this mail envelope folder thingy. But yeah, it's actually, was based on a trilogy, another fantasy trilogy, but one without magic, oddly enough. Normally I have magic in my stories, but this one didn't. I wrote this at like 15 and 16. It was actually inspired by First Night, the movie with Sean Connery and Julia Ormond, and the guy that played Lancel, what's his name? Richard Gere. It was inspired by that movie, and it was a trilogy, and it was A Knight's Bequest, A Knight Errant, A Knight of the Realm. I'm still considering doing that. The problem is that I have 2 lead male characters, like, that are cousins in the book I'm working on right now, and in that story it was 2 lead males who were brothers, so I'm not sure, like, how close they would be to each other. Oh, this one I have not seen in a long time. I actually wrote this with, like, calligraphy. Oops, I'm covering I haven't seen this in a long time. This is The Lords of Andrigal by Joanna Glass. I hand did that with calligraphy pens. I hate that it's backwards. Sorry, guys. I still have not been able to find my tripod. But yeah, this was the 4-book series that I was working on before I finally just took some of the elements of it, basically all of the backstory and the main premise for the series, and mixed that with what I had from the Count of Rontasea material that I just showed you earlier. But yeah, like this, I drew my own maps. I still draw my own map, but this was drawn when I was like 15 years old, I think. I think it was actually pretty decent. Like, it wasn't terrible. And it's had all the, like, the main, and let me just read you the blurb that came with this, because I'm never going to write this one, so I can share it. Let me just read the blurb. The Lords of Andrigal by Joanna Glass. The Lords of Andrigal is a book that tells of the 12 knights and 4 lords that rule the 4 regions of Andrigal under the great king Carmond. Ooh. Fashioned after the Old English tales of Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, this book is designed for adventurers of all ages and interests. Dragons, fairylands, pirates, treachery, all of this and more in the tales of the noble lords of Andrigal and their knights. And then, like, I had a ton of names in here, but this is just funny. So then there was the 4 books. Actually, I probably was going to end up being a 5-book thing. It was the Lords of the West, the Lords of the South, the Lords of the East, and the Lords of the North. And then in the Lords of the North, somebody betrayed the whole country, and they ended up going into the Lords of Andrigal, which was the big war finale book. So that's fun. This is just a random notebook that I think every author probably has somewhere, full of my fantasy things, if you couldn't tell. It's names and world-building ideas and random brainstorming tips. That's just fun. And I keep it around, I think, largely for sentimental reasons. I'm not sure that I'm ever going to use anything in there, but we'll see. Aha! Bardoniel, Prince of Glory. This actually, like, I make fun of this, but this will probably end up being the base for one of my fantasy sci-fi crossovers that I'm going to do. But it's about 2 sisters, Erilyn and Eliana. Man, I mixed materials a lot. Like, I had bits and pieces of story, which is great because I have all this material. But, like, there's pieces of, like, world building in here that were from my original trilogy, my original fantasy trilogy. There's pieces from other stories. It's like they all kind of bleed together a little bit. So when I go back and rewrite stuff, I'm going to have to be very careful to make sure that I differentiate the worlds and differentiate different pieces of information. I think that's almost it for fantasy. If you hadn't noticed, I'm a little fantasy obsessed. And so probably 75% of what I write is fantasy. But I do have the what's left over is split pretty even between historical fiction and science fiction. So this is a notebook. It says Joanna and Jade on it. We started doing like a couple of little co-projects. There's actually 2 of them. One was a fantasy, one of them was a sci-fi. Jade, if you're watching this, I may be calling you to see if I can just take the material that I wrote, because I don't think we're going to finish these books, but there was a couple of characters that I really liked that I did, so we'll see. And then the last fantasy notebook, that's actually like a fantasy notebook, is Elf Story and Original Fairy Letters. So before the big giant behemoth letters book that I showed you, my friend Shalise and I did a series of letters that ended after like the first letter. We never finished it. But it was basically a Lord of the Rings fan fiction. And that's what that notebook started off as. And then we kept trying to come up with some ideas for something else. I ended up coming up with some really cool characters and some really cool world building. So there is a novel that will be coming out of this. But I can't really say more than that because, first of all, it ended up being nothing like Lord of the Rings. So I'm not really sure how that works out. Like, it's nothing like Lord of the Rings anymore. It went way off the deep end from that one. But also, I can't tell you because it is currently in the works. We are doing world building and all kinds of amazing things, and I don't want to tell any more secrets because I might get in trouble. So that's really the last one. I do have these 2 notebooks, which are fashion notebooks. When I was 10 to 15 years old, I was obsessed with drawing dresses for my female characters. So I'll just kind of show you like some of these. Let me see if I can find some. Okay, so this is one of the dresses I drew when I was 10. Okay, so I was terrible, but it did get better. Okay, let me see if I can find. Okay, alright, this was one of the ones that I designed when I was like 15. So I did improve. I have 2 giant notebooks full of dresses. And then lastly, I did have one more fantasy notebook that I don't know how I missed. But it's my fairy tales retold. Rewritten, retold. And again, you can see the Joanna R. Glass thing. Since then, I have changed my name. But this is where I keep all my fairy tale novella ideas. And I'm not going to open it or really talk about it anymore because I want that to be a little bit of a secret. I am working toward getting more of those written after Littlehood, and so I don't really want to talk about it and spoil those for you. There will be more videos on my fairy tale series coming up, so don't worry about that. And then this is just too cute. This I actually wrote, I think, when I was 8. It's called A Summer's Ground by Joanna Glass and Molly Roberts. Molly Roberts was a friend of mine growing up. Look, I even took the time as an 8-year-old to draw like this really elaborate like opening for my first chapter, and I never made it past like chapter 2, I think. That's a lot of these is chapters 1, 2, and 3, if I got that far. So, okay, that's all that I have for fantasy, and wouldn't you know it, we only have like 4 more notebooks left. I am such a fantasy nerd. Okay. So I do have a historical fashion notebook for my historical fiction. And I just, chart stuff. Okay, Western material. I am in love with Westerns, and I do have one in the works. It will probably not be released for a very long time to come, but I am working on one that hopefully will eventually be written. And this falls in line with that. You can see Western novels. And I'm actually going to show you, because I did my own illustrations for a long time. I'm going to show you just some of these illustrations. Like, this is them riding in a wagon. It's a very dramatic story. Like, it starts off with them fleeing their homes. It's very dramatic. I do not know how to write, like, non-dramatic stories. And then this little duo here, An American History, which I do not have a title for, of the families Grant, Perry, and Crenshaw in X number of volumes. And this was when I only had it from 1811 to 1945. But and again, you can see Joanna Hourglass. But I extended it and actually added how the families got to America to begin with. This is it. This thing is massive. Like, it looks small-ish on the thing, but it's cardboard. It is like 2 pieces of cardboard glued together. It is the genealogies of these 3 families that I did all of them. Like, I did down every child and then the important people from each family, who they married and what kids they had. All the way from 1730, which they, whoops, okay, so it wasn't 1730, 1742, that's when they get married, down to 1972, I think, is the latest kid that I have born, 1972. So obviously quite a few of these people will not be in the story because the story ends at 1945 after World War II. But still, who knows? I might keep going. You never know. But look at that. This thing used to sit on the back of my door, like when I was, had my own room and stuff. So, yeah, exciting. Let's see, what other notebooks do I have? Okay, that's all science fiction. I have one more, I think, giant historical fiction notebook. Because the book, I actually have several books for historical fiction that I never did the work for. They're just ideas in my head, and someday they will be written, but I don't know if you can read that. Can you read that? The Idle Hollow series. So this is a series set during World War I. It is about the main character's name is Madeline Gray, and then her brother Harold Andrew Gray, and then her love interest Colin Douglas, who's actually Scottish, because you can't get much more Scottish than Colin Douglas. But yeah, it follows them through World War I, and of course they all, well, I don't know if they all lived to the end yet. You'll have to wait and see, because I'm going to be writing this thing someday. It's a series of 4 books, and each book takes place over 1 year of the war, and then the last year of the war, 1918, is actually an epilogue at the end of the 4th book. So I think that's my last historical fiction. Let me just double check. I know what that one is. Yes, okay, so I take that back. I do have 2 modern stories. Modern day stories. I don't really write modern day stories. I just don't. I find them like they don't challenge me enough creatively, I guess. Either that or I'm really... okay, that's not true. So I find difficulty writing something that does not revolve around some kind of giant world-altering like war or outbreak of disease or anything like that. Like, it has to be huge, and then I'm all for it. I really struggle with writing little modern day stories. Even though those can be some of the most compelling books to read, I've just never been able to write one. So I'm challenging myself to eventually write one. I will hope to do that someday. Okay, now we move on to science fiction, and I promise you we're almost done. I only have 2 notebooks of this either, despite the fact that I have, how many books did I say I had in science fiction? Like 6? 8. Is it 8? Yeah, like 8 books that I'm planning on writing. Basically like 4 series, but I only have 2 notebooks of materials, because I haven't gotten around to working on them yet. So the one is just full of like random, like it's really just like this story that I started writing. Yeah, I started writing it, and you can see like it's handwritten. Like, it's all handwritten, nothing printed. And it was about a girl, of course, which this is a story I'll never write. So it was about a girl whose brother worked for some secret organization and was like their tech guy, basically. But he knew everything about their organization, so he was a hot target for the bad guys, whoever they are in the story. And then his sister, he worked very hard to hide her from the world, so she's living with these people. Of course, their parents are dead. Their real parents are dead. So she's living with some foster parents of sorts who kind of know who she is, but not really. And then, like, she ends up getting taken to meet her brother and ends up getting captured and injected with, like, this serum stuff as, like, a means of getting her to talk. It makes her very sick, and in order to save her, this doctor has to inject her with something else that ends up giving her these crazy superpowers, and her physical appearance changes, and it's really intense. Depending on the version of the story that you came up with, she either fell in love with the doctor or with the guy who came to bring her to her brother. There's a couple of different versions of the story, but again, I'm never gonna write that, at least as far as I know. I have too many other stories to write. So yeah, that one's fun to just kind of talk about. I think it was inspired by the Avengers, so yeah, it was probably pretty close to that at the time. I was a teenager at the time. Then I have my untitled masterpiece, Space Opera Saga. That is someday I am going to write this one. There may be music in the background. Trudy turned on some music. But it's basically a galaxy in a far, far away kind of deal, where it happens in a separate universe, and there are humans, but they're not like the predominant species. There are many other species, some humanoids, some completely not. It's got a wide variety of different cultures, and of course, many planets, and it has, lots of stuff. I don't want to get into that too much, though. That's really the bulk of it. I do have stuff from my Civil War novel in one of my notebooks, but I think this video is probably already too long. But I have had so much fun making this, and just looking through my notebooks and remembering all the great stories that I have sitting here just waiting to be unearthed and worked with. So yeah, thank you guys so much for letting me share this with you. And if you enjoyed this video, if you had all enjoyed this, I'm actually considering, after a while, doing a couple of different videos, like maybe one a month, where I sit down and I discuss the actual stories from the different genres that I am planning on doing after Coastlander is done. And again, I will be making a fairy tale novella series one soon, because I am going to be getting back into that not too much longer here, I hope. So yeah, that's basically it, and I'll show you a video. This is why writers take such a long time to pack. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. And yeah, again, just comment below if you really want to see some more videos on just the kind of stuff maybe that I'm writing, and some of the stuff that I'm planning on working on in the future, near future or far future. As always, just, my usual outro. You can go check out my website to learn more about me and my books, and I have a blog there, and I have a newsletter there as well. And again, let me know in the comments if y'all would be interested in that self-published checklist as a part of like the mailing list, as like a perk to that, because I am considering putting that on there. I'd love your input. So yeah, share in the comments below what your stories are. What genres are you most interested in working on? How many stories do you currently have like sitting on the back burner? Are you a multitasker who works on multiple novels at once? Do you do more short stories, more novellas? Just let's get talking in the comments and see, what's going on in your world. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. So yeah, I'm wrapping this up now. Bye!